Welcome to Normal Island. I'm Curtis Daly and I'm joined by Megan Ruth, political TikTok commentator and Canadian British influencer. So excited to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
And we've already got fans in the chat already. Like, oh my god, it's Megan Ruth. So looks like you're a bit of a celebrity for our audience. But we're gonna have a fantastic show. I'm really excited to spend the next
Mhm.
hour with you. But this is what we got coming up for. Sorry, this is what we've got coming up for you on tonight's show. The Green Party votes to abolish landlords. Zach Polanski calls Nigel Farage a fascist, and Kemi Badenoch wants to replicate ICE. Now, if you're not currently a subscriber, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. Like the stream, as of course helps with the algorithm. And as always, we'll be getting to your comments at the end. But on to our first story. The Green Party has passed a motion to abolish landlords during conference over the weekend, a motion which included policies that disincentivise private landlords passed with an overwhelming majority. Now, the motion includes introduce rent controls and abolish right to buy, abolish Section 21 evictions and make all rental agreements secure long-term tenancies that can only be terminated by the tenant, land value tax levied on owners, not tenants, no exceptions, business rates on Airbnbs, short lets, no exceptions, double taxation for empty properties, puts national insurance on private rents, remove finance for landlords, and end buy-to-let mortgages. Provide government-backed finance to tenants, give tenants first right to buy when landlords sell, with their total rent paid discounted. Provide finance to councils. Councils should be given second right to buy when landlords sell. Government must change prudential borrowing requirements to allow councils to buy back and build new housing on a massive scale. Now, since the motion passed, unsurprisingly, many attacked the policy. Labour MP Chris Bryant tweeted this: I have no idea what such a policy might mean. I mean, it might help to read the policy. I mean, if you don't understand what it means, have a look at it. Although the first leader of the Labour Party understands the policy very well. So as you can see, this is like the original manifesto, shall we say, and it says no landlordism. Now, clearly, Chris Bryant didn't get the memo. He's a landlord himself. Labour MP Chris Bryant made £649,500 in gross profit selling 2 London flats the taxpayer helped pay the mortgage interest on. When the rules changed, preventing MPs from claiming mortgage interest, the Rhondda MP rented out the penthouse he owns for around £3,000 a month and claimed £84,350 from the taxpayer to rent a different property to live in himself. Now, according to some, this policy equals communism. What next? A ban on factions? Literal communism. Now, I'm sorry, but that's literally not communism, but it sounds like they're trying to threaten us with a good time. Now, content creator Hippatias Lantern said this: the Greens are fundamentally an unserious party. Now, if you see, they have a red rosette in their name. I mean, Labour, the party that championed Keynesian economics, who was famously anti-landlord, thinks addressing the housing crisis is unserious. Radical centrist dad Nick Tyrone, of course, weighed in. Further proof, had it been required, that the Green Party is not a serious party. So, we have communism and not being a serious party, when the motion simply calls for policies that predates Margaret Thatcher. Now, earlier on today, I spoke to Alexander Salans, Green Party member and co-author of the motion. Can you explain the policies within the motion and why these will help tackle the housing crisis?
Yeah, so landlordism fundamentally was on its deathbed at the end of the late 1970s. We had gone through such a heavy period of regulation of taxes, and then the actual competition in the housing market that represented by mass council house building at the end of World War II. The policies in this are essentially just going back to that. So rent controls, we're going to end right to buy, which is it's taking the plug out of the bath that is the supply of council housing. We're going to end finance to landlords in the form of buy-to-let mortgages, which just gives them an access to cheap credit. We're going to tax them in the form of land value tax, and coupled with rent controls, that means that it will be levied on the landlord and not the tenant, but also add national insurance onto private rents. We're going to make sure that we are buying back these privately rented properties so that councils can rent them out as council housing. That's not just when the landlord sells, but it's also if it's not insulated properly, as well as if it's kept empty. We're going to tax short-term lets to try and bring them back into onto the market, bring them back into council ownership. And finally, we're going to the last policy, which is a personal favorite of mine, is the establishment of a state-owned housing manufacturing company, which councils would be able to go to, and it would be specialized in building council housing on a mass scale. But it would also have a mandate to innovate on design, on architecture, on manufacturing techniques, and really providing the well-skilled, long-term unionized jobs that we actually need in the country.
So what was the reception like at conference? I mean, did this pass easily, or was there kind of a robust debate to get this through?
I think that there was a good debate. There was a good debate on the plenary floor. There was a lot of goodwill in the conference. I had a few people come up to me arguing against it, but nothing bad. It's not Labour Party conference. Not that I've ever been to one. I would say in the room, it wasn't close, otherwise we would have actually counted the votes, but I would say in the plenary hall, it was about 80-20 in favour. I'll be honest, a lot of the objections to the motion were about the title and about the tone, and not about the substantive policies or even just being anti-landlord. There weren't that many people there who wanted to argue against the fact that landlordism is bad. It was mostly just, should we be saying this, loud and proud? Should we be arguing against landlordism as an institution? Because I think the thing which differentiates landlordism in the UK to, say, Germany or America is landlords are people. They are in the UK individuals. There are 2.5 million of them. Whereas in America, America or Germany, they tend to be corporate entities. They tend to be companies, which are obviously a lot easier to other in that sense.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. The motion is called Abolish Landlords. Now, of course, when you look into the detail of the policy, it's not really abolishing, it's disincentivizing new landlords, almost self-abolishment. But the title, was that something that was thought about for a long time? Because I understand some people may have been opposed to such a direct sort of communication on what the policy is. But do you think that Abolish Landlords was or is part of the new direction of the Green Party, which is to be bolder and have more direction? Was that something that factored into the title?
I mean, we did. So me and the person I co-wrote the original motion with last year, Martin Farley, we did want it to capture attention. Partly this is because most of this policy, other than the state-owned housing manufacturer, most of this policy has been Green Party policy for years. And no one talks about it because for the longest time, we have not talked about policy in a way which captures the imagination, in a way that really speaks to the actual political situation in the country. We don't talk in terms of narrative and story. We tend to talk in terms of policies, individual, kind of siloed policies in a vacuum. And it just doesn't connect to people. And so this was an effort to connect to people, to connect to their lived experience, and to provide them with a narrative about the housing crisis. And that is a concentration of wealth, of housing wealth in particular in this case, in the hands of landlords, and the need to redistribute that. I think it should be the start of a new direction for how the Green Party treats its conference and its policy making process. Some new members are always surprised that there aren't these great political debates at conference like the fringes. They tend not to be about the politics, and they tend to be about the individual policies. There's one on PR, there's one on UBI, but it's never really about the way that we want the economy to function or the way that we want our democracy to function. This is, I think, a kind of a challenge to our policy working groups, to the people proposing policies, that you need to make it interesting. You need to make it interesting, not just to the people inside the room, which is important. I think if it was just like stop the housing crisis, I don't think it would have connected. But to the people outside of conference as well, to the media, to, every person on the street, make it interesting for social media, make it go viral, because that's how we change the narrative as a political party.
Some people could have a lot of questions about this policy, maybe if they haven't read through the detail of it. What is your response to some who say, oh, this will make people who are currently renting homeless?
I mean, it won't. If the person, it won't. If the landlord sells, the house does not like implode as though the landlord was holding it together, like Samson with his bare hands. He just won't. If the landlord sells, as if the policies are enacted, if the landlord sells, either the council will buy it, or they get first right of refusal, or another landlord buys it, or the tenant buys it, or someone else buys it who will live in it. That tenant can be given council housing. That tenant will be able to buy another home, because the whole premise of the motion is to make housing affordable, not just rented housing, but to bring down the price of housing, to make it more affordable. That is one of the key purposes of a land value tax. To decommodify land, to decommodify housing, to make it more affordable, so that we can actually live our lives without having to worry about being homeless. I think there are a lot of people who treat landlordism like a certainty, and I said this in the room. The Green Party fundamentally exists to look beyond the certainties that we are told. It looks, we are there to imagine a better world, and to imagine how we get there. Okay. And then to try and do it, to try and achieve that, and people can call that utopian. People can call that unserious. Imagination is not a sin. Imagination and hope, they're not some sort of childish endeavor. They should be what we all aspire to. To try and make a better world, not just to try and do like 1%, 2%, 3%, here and there, or to try and manage decline. No, I think the Green Party exists to be better than that, and I think that's why we are where we are now.
Last question: if someone can't get a mortgage, will there be social housing available for them? And for those that still want to rent, will council houses be available for rent?
Yeah. So, this isn't an abolition of renting. This is about saying that the two main factors in the housing market will be owner-occupiers or council housing. There is still the rest of the pie, which, will be social housing providers, although the Green Party would obviously like housing associations to be democratic organizations, but there are things like housing co-ops and communes and all those kind of things, which again should be democratic. But this is about saying that it's owner-occupiers, council housing. Those are the biggest slices of the pie. And we should be building council housing at a scale that anyone that wants one can get one. Okay, and again, people can say that's unrealistic, but that's what council housing was invented for. That's what it was built for. Okay, if you want, let's say I got a job in Bristol. I live in Brighton. I should be able to go and rent a council house there, and there should be stock enough for that to happen. Council housing needs to be redefined beyond the idea that it is just temporary accommodation or emergency accommodation or, accommodation for poor people. It needs to be, no, we need to redefine it. and move to a situation much closer to what they have in Vienna, where council housing is for everyone. It's for doctors, it's for teachers, it's for accountants, it's for anyone that wants one. It could be for students. Say you move across the country to go study in another city. You could be living in a council flat. And that's normal. That's respectable. That's what we need to move towards.
So that was Alexander Salins, co-author of the motion. Megan, what are your thoughts on this motion being passed, and also those who've attacked this as communism?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to address the title of it, because I read an interesting study recently that was published on nature.com that found out of 35 million public Facebook posts, 75% of forwarded links were shared without clicking on them. So I know that he said that he wants to make an impact, and that's why he chose the title. But I think we're living in an age as well where people are sharing, news articles without even looking at what is being said in the article, and then that's causing further division between the populace. So that was my initial thought when I read the policy after hearing the title of it. So I'm just gonna. The word communism has been thrown around so much; it's almost starting to lose meaning. People say communist just like they say fascist, without understanding what these words mean, or what communism means. So I'm not surprised when people are calling it communist. It's almost expected at this point. Whatever a policy that they don't agree with is communism or socialism. It's almost like in the woodwork of our political landscape right now. So that was my first impression of that. But the bill itself, now I come from a family of landlords, so I think I have a very interesting perspective, or unique perspective on this, because I do 100% believe that a huge part of the issues behind the UK's housing crisis is a lack of social homes. So there definitely needs to be a focus on that. I do believe that private landlordism can still coexist, albeit with regulation. It needs to be heavily regulated. My parents are landlords. They're good people. I think there's a lot of people on the left, especially, and I've been there. I've been on both sides of the equation. I've lived in homes that have had horrible landlords. But it's so easy to say that, every landlord is evil, when that's not the case, because my mom's not evil. I think they're just taking advantage of a system that, has landlords, like capitalism and all that. So I do think that they can coexist. I want to say as well, a big problem, like we can argue that the one landlord who has one property is the issue, but a bigger issue, and it is happening, because you have Blackstone and BlackRock buying up property in the UK and monopolizing the housing market. It's happening more and more. It's already happened in the US. It's happening here, and that is a huge thing that we need to prevent, because that is worse. That is much worse than one person owning a rental, because that as soon as that happens in the UK, and it's happening more and more, we need to just stop that. We just need to stop that completely. Also, something that is happening as well is a huge percentage of the population is aging, and a large percentage of home owners are pensioners. So in the next 10, 20 years, there's going to be a lot more houses coming in on the market that were previously owned by pensioners. What's going to happen? They're going to be bought up, because they're not going to be bought up by regular people. They're going to be bought up by the wealthy corporations, because regular people are not going to be able to afford them. So we definitely need to have plans in place to be able to prevent basically it's an inevitable catastrophe of all these homes being on the market and just sitting empty because nobody can afford them.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point you made about the name of the bill, which is abolish landlords. Of course, it's not actually abolishing them overnight. It's just a robust housing policy which disincentivizes private landlords, right? And I asked the question, I was like, what was the thought process that went into it? And I think for them, it was like, under Zach Polansky, the party has become more bold, more direct, and I think that was done on purpose. I'm with you there. I mean, a lot of people will read the headlines, don't look into the policy, but I kind of feel like those that are against it were never sort of supportive of it anyway. In terms of sort of individual people versus corporations, I'm really glad you brought up BlackRock. There is a huge systemic issue when it comes to commercial landlordism. When you've got individuals or companies buying a hell of a lot of housing, lots of them, and renting them out. There is obviously a difference between that and like an individual landlord. And I think what's, to me, good about these policies is it's not like we're going to ban it and it's illegal to be a landlord overnight, because that wouldn't work. But rather, I think you're going to, at least if these policies were implemented, you would probably see like a 5 to 10 year transition period where all of those years, you're still probably going to have like the individual landlord. I don't think one guy renting out one place is causing the housing crisis. Now, of course, my opinion is I think it's just immorally, I think it's wrong regardless. But on a policy level, though, I'm with you. I get it. It's the biggest issue here is sort of big corporations and big business trying to sort of suck out wealth from the country. But do you think this is still a good direction? Because no other political party is really speaking about this.
I do. I think it is a good direction. And even though, as I said, with my criticisms of, people sharing articles without reading them, it has gotten people talking. So that was the point, and it has. Yeah. And I think landlordism and the housing crisis in general needs to be addressed, because as I stated, like, we're kind of at the precipice of this age where there's going to be a significant amount of homes on the market, with the pensioners kicking the bucket, and there, what are we going to be doing with them? We need to turn them into social homes, for one, at least a large percentage of them. So yeah, I do agree with the direction that the Green Party is going with this.
Yeah, and absolutely, when it comes to social housing, council housing, that is what needs to be built. And I think, the Labour Party, which is the party of council houses, are pretty much abandoned. But let's leave it there and go on to our second story of the evening. It's still staying with the Green Party, though. Now, Zach Polansky was interviewed by Novara Media at the Green Party conference, where he did not hold back on Nigel Farage, calling him a fascist.
I think in Nigel Farage, we're dealing with a fascist, and as much as I will do anything, almost anything, to make sure we have an actual democracy in this country, I would say making a fascist a prime minister would seem counterproductive. In terms of a Labour coalition, it's something...
So you wouldn't support PR if it meant that made Nigel Farage prime minister?
No. I just think ultimately you have to have a red line. And although if you said to me, what's the number one thing that I think would change the British political system, I would say it's PR. Now, before I get atted, I realise that can seem privileged, because people are really struggling with their wages, they're struggling with the cost of living crisis, they're struggling with fascism and racism. All of those things absolutely matter. But until we get proportional representation, I think it's very difficult to deal with those things meaningfully, because we know we could get Farage being Prime Minister on 25 to 30% of the vote. Despite a majority not electing him, he could get a huge majority. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's a reasonable scenario.
I mean, I think the more controversial point here is that Zach has sort of made a red line for PR, saying he wouldn't support PR if it made Farage Prime Minister. Now, following on from this, Lewis Goodall at LBC tried to nail Zach on calling Farage a fascist.
You've described Nigel Farage as a fascist. Now, fascism, the last time I checked, involved ultra-authoritarian nationalism, the suppression of dissent, a single-party state, a cult of personality, and the use of violence or paramilitarism to achieve its ends. Which of those criteria would you say Nigel Farage satisfies?
I think most of them are on the way if you actually listen to the things that he's saying. Also,
what, a single-party state? He's not proposed to abolish British democracy. That's absurd.
Well, he's not yet, but also during Brexit, when you think about take back control, some of the themes that were in there all seem to be speaking.
You think that Brexit was about the consolidation and the creation of a single-party state?
I think Brexit was ultimately about protecting the wealth of multimillionaires and billionaires.
Yeah, but that's different. No, you're changing the conversation there, Zach Polansky. No, I've just asked you about how you think Nigel Farage satisfies the criteria of fascism, one of which involves a really key one, the creation of a single-party state. What has Nigel Farage said or done which would indicate any legitimacy to the idea that he's in favour of a single-party state?
Well, I was about to finish with what I was saying, which is when you have excess power in this country and wealth, which often come together, when that utilizes working class resentment, you don't have to be a historian to know there are many times in the history when that's exactly when fascism begins.
I think my favourite thing about mainstream media journalists is cutting people off and not allowing them to finish. Right? Maybe Luke Goodall should take some tips from that. Look, I don't know whether I would consider Farage a full-on fascist, right? I'm happy for my mind to be changed, by the way. I think there are absolutely fascists within reform. But I think what Lewis misses here is that fascists don't typically say they are fascists, okay? It's not likely a politician would claim to support a one-party state beforehand. But that is one of many points on fascism. Like, he stuck to that one point, but there's so many other factors to look at. Now, scholars don't always agree on the definition of fascism. Key points would include nationalism, being anti-democratic, support for one ethnic group over the other, and opposition to individual liberty. It can also mean corporatism, which Mussolini claimed to be, a state which is completely blended with corporations. Now, that is starting to happen already in my eyes. So, is there any evidence that points to Nigel Farage being a fascist? Well, for starters, when he was younger, many teachers described him to be so. Now, I'm going to read out a paragraph from that piece. A recently unearthed letter from the rabid right-winger's time at posh public school Dulwich College alleges that he marched through a quiet Sussex village very late at night shouting Hitler Youth songs. Written by Mr. Farage's former English teacher, Chloe Deakin, the letter was sent to the school's headmaster in response to Mr. Farage being made a prefect. Former Dulwich College teacher Bob Jope told Channel 4 News, to some extent, you might say the accusation from some staff was that Nigel had voiced views that were simply not right-wing, as nobody's going to object to a place on the spectrum, but views that were quite clearly racist. Now, is that enough? I mean, it's true that people say some really stupid stuff as a kid. So if that's the only evidence, I don't buy it. But there's more. This is a clip from a Farage profile created by Led by Donkeys.
April 1964. Nigel Farage is born in Farnborough, Kent. He attends private prep school before enrolling at the fee-paying Dulwich College at the age of 10. 1978. The 14-year-old Farage joins the Conservative Party after seeing Margaret Thatcher's radical free market mentor, Keith Joseph, speak at the school. 1981. An English teacher at Dulwich College writes that a colleague who teaches Farage, quote, described his publicly professed racist and neo-fascist views, while another colleague recounted that, at a combined cadet force camp organised by the college, Farage and others had marched through a quiet Sussex village very late at night, shouting Hitler Youth songs. One Jewish pupil will later recall how Farage would sidle up to him and say Hitler was right and gas them. Fellow pupil Nick Gordon-Brown remembers he looked like a middle-aged man when he was a sixth former. He was a very vocal National Front supporter. There was a Jewish lad at school whom he was horrible to. With Jewish schoolmates, he made no secret of his distaste for them. What you see now is what he was like then. He meets Mark Devon, a former UKIP activist who is now head of research at the neo-Nazi BNP, and the editor of Mindbenders, a supposed exposé of Jews in the media. Farage is seeking compromising information on UKIP leader Alan Sked in an effort to oust him. A photo shows Farage and Devon at the meeting, along with Tony Leckermer, a BNP member who served 3 years in prison for handling explosives in an attempt to bomb a left-wing group. Leckermer was given another 3 years for stabbing a Jewish schoolteacher who had been trying to remove a BNP sticker on the underground.
It's not a pretty picture, is it? There's also the fact that he is friends and a supporter of Donald Trump, who is currently leading a fascist government in the US. He also said this in 2017.
Does that mean, Nigel, if we are Brexiting, that every civil servant, every ambassador, even head of the army or head of the navy, would they have to be replaced if they are remainders? Is that democracy, Nigel?
Well, absolutely. The job of the civil service is to do what the elected government of the day tells them to do. And I know this government doesn't really look like a Brexit government very often, but the fact is they were elected in 2017, Jilko. Hang on. They were elected.
Okay. You're right.
They were elected on a manifesto to deliver Brexit, and if civil servants are seen to be an obstruction to that, then they should either change their ways or be removed. Absolutely.
I mean, I think whether Farage is a fascist or not, I don't think it's crazy or a crazy thing for Polanski to say that he is. I mean, the point is to not the point is to not give cover to politicians. And given Farage's dodgy past, why should Lewis Goodall shut down this so quickly? I also think there's a difference between an individual fascist and someone ushering a fascist state. Look, calling for mass deportations, that is a key policy of fascist governments. Controlling immigration, I think, is not racist or fascist, but being ideologically wedded to mass deportations for no logical or economic reason is different, and that is the current position of the Reform Party. Megan, Zach hasn't made a misstep since being elected to leader, but given how the entire media will push back on him, and most people certainly don't think Farage is a fascist, is this a tactical error that could backfire on Zach?
I think it could, only because, as I said before, people are throwing around fascist and communists and socialists, and they're starting to lose its meaning. And there's this huge push by the far right to propagandize fascism in itself, and they're trying to push away from the fascist movement by claiming that fascism is left. So it's I think by using fascist, I've talked to a lot of reform and conservative voters who don't believe Farage is a fascist at all. But as soon as I use the word fascist, it's almost like the conversation's done, because they have no interest in communicating any further, because they hear fascist and they tune out. So I think at this point, because it's been utilized so much, it's almost like it's exhausted itself, so I do think it could, there are a lot of reform supporters, I do think, that could be keen on green policies, if they were to, listen to what we had to say. And they're not going to listen if we just keep saying fascist.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of the problem, is you say that word and a lot of people don't listen. At the same time, to sort of provide an alternative narrative, I think it's a genuine conversation on whether Farage is a fascist or not. I don't know if he is, but I don't really have a problem with the politician saying so. I don't think he's just a centre-right politician, given his sort of past links. And also, maybe Zach is understanding that, look, the Green Party are not trying to get in government, not right now anyway. They're trying to drum up their own support. And if he puts sort of fascism next to Nigel Farage, maybe he can try and move the window a little bit. I guess so. I mean, I suppose it'll be a far bigger tactical error if you were the leader of the Labour Party trying to win a majority of people over, trying to get reform voters, for example. But I think a lot of people wouldn't vote for the Green Party anyway. But I do think it's absolutely true that calling someone racist or fascist doesn't really open up the discussion. It's kind of a nuance though for me, because I think if someone's overtly a racist or fascist, you should call them that. It's our freedom of speech to say that. But I think being a national politician, it could be more difficult. I actually want to ask you as well, what are your thoughts on Zach saying that he would ditch proportional representation if it made a reform government more likely? Was that a mistake to say?
I don't. I think at the moment, Farage is the biggest threat to the UK, hands down. He's the biggest threat. So I don't think that was a mistake for him to make. And I personally do believe that Farage is a fascist. I just think when appealing for support, it might hinder him by using that word. I mean, there are other ways to go around the conversation without using fascist, but I personally think he is the dehumanization of migrants. A key element of fascism is using a scapegoat as a common enemy, to gain support. And he's doing that. He's using Trump's playbook. He's just a few years behind. I'm an immigrant. I see it all the time. And it's been happening since I even moved here 8 years ago. And he's been instilling this fear of immigrants for years, and it's a slow process. Fascism doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow process, and I think I do agree with Zach that, he hasn't, maybe there are certain elements of fascism that he hasn't expressed yet. But if he's following Trump's playbook, and I do believe he is, that's just going to come with the course.
Yeah, no, very interesting. Again, I'm to those watching, I'm very open to be considered whether he's a fascist or not. Again, I'm not saying he's definitely not. I don't know, but I'm all ears. Let's park that there. But before we go on to our final story, I just want to say that we'd like to remind our viewers that we are 5 volunteers keeping this ship going. We do this around our paid jobs, and our goal is to become full-time, meaning we can increase our content, be far more ambitious, and build a sustainable left-wing alternative. Your help has made so much difference already, by the way, from equipment to covering rallies, interviews. Your support means everything, and we rely on small donations. So if you want to be part of a media organisation that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. You can also become a YouTube member for just 99p. Thank you, and let's go to our final story. Kemi Badenoch says that she wants our immigration policy to mimic ICE. The Conservatives will pledge to create a new immigration task force modelled on Donald Trump's controversial immigration and customs enforcement agency, The Guardian understands. The party's leader, Kemi Badenoch, is expected to announce the policy on Sunday as the Conservatives heads into the annual conference after a year of historic low poll ratings. The proposed removals force will be tasked with deporting 150,000 people a year in the move to tackle illegal immigration. Badenoch will say that the ICE model has proved to be a successful approach in removing migrants who have illegally entered the US. ICE removed nearly 200,000 people in the first 7 months of Trump's second presidency, US media reported. However, it has also faced widespread criticism, both for arresting legal migrants and allegedly targeting people on the grounds of their race. Now, I think The Guardian has massively underplayed Trump's immigration policy. It's not just received criticism, right? They are literally the modern day Gestapo. ICE has targeted anyone they don't like, not distinguishing between those who are legal or illegal. They've been going around, the ICE enforcement officers, they've been going around not wearing uniforms and terrorizing communities and even zip tying kids. Now, ICE isn't about following the law, finding people who have illegally come to the US. It is, and we were talking about fascism, this is a fascist group seeking to destroy people's lives. They have on countless occasions simply disappeared people, many facing no trial whatsoever. On multiple occasions, people have died in their custody. Megan, what are your thoughts about this latest announcement from the Tories? And do you think they are actually way to the right of the Reform Party?
I think they're trying to be, because they see how poorly they're doing in the polls, and they're just trying to, get any voter they can back to their party, because, Reform are a bunch of Tory defectors. So they're definitely trying to. And what they don't understand is that it's going to be incredibly hard to even pull this off in the UK, because most undocumented immigrants are hiding from authorities. So the majority of undocumented immigrants are visa overstayers. A lot of them are living with their family members in mixed houses who are legal. Many of them are kids who are born in the UK, because the UK doesn't have birthright citizenship. So it's going to be incredibly hard to pull this off. I think a lot of it is just words in its performative to try and get any resemblance of what the Tory party used to be back. Because right now they're performing so poorly.
Yeah, no, I think it's funny how we're having a conversation about fascism, but to me, the biggest sort of fascist policy of the Trump administration is ICE and immigration. Like I said, some of the stories that are coming out is absolutely disgusting, and it's so desperate for Kemi Badenoch to try and do this. I think that's kind of what it is, really. It's just pure desperation. But no one's going to vote for them. I mean, that party's dead. The Labour Party's dying. The Conservatives are dead. It's basically going to be Reform and maybe the Greens. But let's go to our comments and bring in our producer, Ben. Ben, how are we doing? I don't know if you can hear us. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to find the unmute button.
Okay.
I am about as good on this stuff as a boomer. That's unfair on Kevin. Poor Kevin. Sorry, just bullying one of our friends. Okay, so as usual, I was just looking for comments to tag in with the ice stuff there. Yeah, to be fair, let's go and let's do super chats first of all. And we've got Kevin Hurst became a member. Welcome, Kevin.
Welcome,
Thank you
Kev.
for coming in. Yeah, by the way, the Kevin that I was bullying is not you. Just to be clear, that's a different Kevin. And Natalie, long-time supporter. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalie. Much appreciated.
Turn Left team, keep up the good work. Thank you. We appreciate it. And Les Watts said, thanks for having Megan on. Obviously, fan. Excellent stuff. And Curious Girl Emma said, Turn Left should interview the Scottish Greens. You know what? We really should. We really should. We've got a guest coming up. Tumbledry and Maya booked in for a few weeks' time, and she's actually part of the Scottish Greens. So it would
interesting.
Be interesting to,
that would be very interesting
to get her to sort of maybe give us some contacts so we can have more contact with them. Anyway, moving on to the main comments. Did I remember to star comments? I did. Excellent. Curious Girl, with regards to the landlord story, Curious Girl Emma said, "Where will all the poor, lonely houses go?" I think people are very dramatic when it comes to what would happen if we were to like implement some of these policies, and I think sometimes I think a lot of people get the wrong end of the stick of what's about to happen. If you get rid of landlords, the housing, the same as taxing the rich. If you tax the rich, their assets don't disappear, right? They don't disappear into the ether. Those assets still exist and can still be used for public benefit. So if they sell up, it still can benefit the general public. I won't ask you for a comment on that one. Corton said, I'm a landlord and agree with their policy, but I doubt they'd get elected. Is this a consideration that they're not going to get elected anyway? So they can kind of say what they like and appeal to the particular voter bloc that they like. Is that a fair comment?
Do you want to say this one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think at this point, we're still like 3.5 years before the election anyway, and it's so hard to say where the political climate's going to be because things change all the time. Reform could be, a laughingstock and completely bust by then. So I think to make any predictions over who's going to be elected or how many seats the Greens are going to get is a little bit it's not productive in any way. I think what we need to be focusing on is getting the message out there and getting people to support the Green Party. I think that's the more important thing that we need to be doing.
Yeah, I think, first of all, they're not going to be elected in terms of becoming a majority. Like small political parties, right? Their first job isn't to win an election; it's to win seats, isn't it? I mean, the Labour Party is a national government, but when it first started, it didn't get that. For the Greens, obviously, it's to get some kind of representation. They went from 1 to 4 seats. Maybe they can get 30 seats. That's great. But I think the more important thing is, to me, Nigel Farage has always been one of the most powerful politicians without being elected to anything. Now, of course, he is a leader of a party and he is an MP. But his power didn't come from being an MP. I mean, Brexit happened largely because of Farage. And he did that by moving the Overton window and having these national debates. So I'm not as concerned about whether the Greens are winning or not. It's not going to be that. It's going to be Reform or Labour. But if the Greens want to talk about like housing policy, such as this is fantastic because we can move the Overton window and have a national conversation. Like, it's so powerful to move debates and have conversations about policy without being in government or in power. I mean, the Labour Party, are in government, but they're not in power. They're in office, but not in power, right? Farage sets the agenda. So I think it's important that the Greens can set the agenda, and this is one of those things.
It's a really good point. I like the distinction between being in power and being in office. That's a great little distinction to draw. Specs Bean Farmer said that the Greens are going to be snubbed by the mainstream press anyway. It's already happened with Laura Kay. Everyone hates landlords, so this will break through on social media, which is where the game needs to be won. I think there's maybe something to that. And Coops said, I love the landlord stuff, but in the 1970s and 1980s, we were able to buy a home on an average wage. We need to bring that back. Tax the 1% to bring back home ownership. My initial thought when seeing this comment was, I agree with you, but of course that's the two things are interconnected. Are you sort of like, you guys with me on this one?
Yeah, I agree. I think what we're experiencing now in the housing market is after decades of home ownership and landlordism, and it's again, this didn't happen right after Thatcher introduced the buying social homes scheme. Sorry, can't remember what it's called at the moment, but it didn't happen overnight. This is after decades. So if I understand where he's coming from, but we will inevitably be back here in a few decades.
Yeah, no, it's true. So this works, I think, in tandem with a lot of policies. One is if we forget about the corporate landlords for a second and think about like the individual landlord who isn't making that much money. I think a lot of people, especially older people, when it comes to wages, when it comes to pension poverty, a lot of people sort of slip into landlordism because it's easy and there's no other way of making money. I think that's even the same for young people. Like, how easy is it to get into property? You just have to have money in the first place, and then you just reinvest it into property, right? So I think it's also an easy way of making money. So if we can have an economy which works for everybody, I also think there's less of incentive for people just to go into property because there's other opportunities. Of course, that also needs to work with massive council housing and cheaper housing too. So if those want to buy a house, should be able to afford to buy a house too. I think all these things need to work together, which I think the Green Party will do. It's not like they've come up with this sort of landlord policy and nothing else. They have spoken strongly about council houses, wealth taxes, public ownership, and more house building. So I don't know why I said public ownership. That doesn't really come into it, but still good policy.
Yes, very much so. I guess social public housing is public ownership. So I'm going to highlight a couple of comments. One where I'm going to sort of bring up a point that kind of disagrees with something that Megan said earlier, and one that kind of more agrees. So Specs Bean Farmer said, in response to you saying like your family is, you come from a family of landlords, said, I'm sure they're a lovely person, but landlordism itself is bad. And I want to kind of put an analogy to you. Because I I've got I also have cards on the table here. I also have members of my family that are landlords.
Same, me too.
Yeah. This is the thing. Like, a lot of us know people who are landlords, perfectly lovely people as individuals. And I want to just put an analogy to you, because like there have been good kings, there have been bad kings, but the institution of kingdom is a power imbalance that shouldn't exist, right? And I think I view landlordism in the same respect, in that, like, and by the way, one of the nicest people I've ever known was my ex-landlord, a lovely guy. When I go back to my university town, I always try and get in touch with him and go for a pint with him, because he's just a lovely person. He's one of the nicest people I've ever met. It's not a critique of them as individuals, but of course, if you said to somebody, oh well, you want to abolish the monarchy, but I've met, but King Charles is a lovely guy. You understand that it doesn't really work as a critique of power, but that's not to say that they're bad people. And you're right in that aspect. You're right to sort of like draw attention to the fact that it doesn't, the interpersonal relationship isn't what matters. but the power relationship could be. What would your sort of like?
I think I said that as a response. Someone said something about, I saw a comment saying there are no moral landlords, and I just wanted to counter that a little bit. That's why I said that. I would agree. I think it's the institution. I mean, when it comes to my family, they are, taking advantage of a system that is there, right? And I think the issue is, I don't know any landlord that's my age. Every landlord I know is, my parents' age or older, because at the moment it's actually quite hard for our generation to even take advantage of the system that is available for us, right? And I know that the only reason that a lot of my friends can buy homes is because their parents have helped them out, right? So it is a system. I do agree that the system is flawed because you're taking advantage of someone's right to housing. I think everyone does have a right to housing. But the other argument I have as well is that I think choice could be an option too. Of housing is an investment, and I still think there is a place for landlords, albeit very heavily regulated. Like nobody has more than one rental property, and it's all consensual based. Like nobody is forced to live in a rental, and I do think that there is a place for that as well. But with that, there needs to be a huge focus on social housing, because I don't think anybody should be forced to live in a rental.
That was a really good response. Sorry, Curtis, go on. That was
Yeah,
a really good response, Megan. Go on.
I've got family members who are landlords, and I mean, look. By the way, I judge every single landlord. Just putting that out there, right? Even my brother. Like I love him, he's my brother, but I will say you're a fucking scumbag landlord whenever I see him. There's obviously a difference between Samuel Leeds, who his initial company was literally called Buy Low, Rent High. Like he's the scummiest of scummiest landlords. And yes, like sort of individual people. There is a difference, but I still, and again, including my own family, I do judge every landlord, because you can still be a nice person, right? Because it's fundamentally a sort of leeching on society. Because what you're doing is using a commodity, which something that shouldn't be a commodity, which is housing, making a profit off it. Not just making a profit off of it, right? You're basically getting someone else to look after your asset, make it all nice and tidy every single day until it appreciates in assets, and then you can sell it off. And people can spend hundreds of thousands of pounds every single year just renting, and at the end of its life cycle haven't got anything to show for it. So I do think it is a deeply, deeply immoral practice, whilst at the same time not saying that every single individual is immoral. I think there's a slight difference there, but I think the system is the main thing. I think Ben's analogy of the kings, right? That's a superb thing. But if you're going to ask me to not judge every single landlord, I judge you all. I'm sorry, I do. There's a different sort of scale of judging. Again, if you're a Samuel Leeds, I hold you with utter contempt. If you're my brother, I doubt he's watching. He probably isn't. I give him shit every single time I see him. But I still love him. He's my family.
Yeah. I think I think it does also matter, just the same as it matters if you have a good king or a bad king, like or a good employer or a bad employer. Like it matters, but obviously there's a huge power imbalance there.
I'd rather Robert Baratheon than Joffrey. God, it's not actually Baratheon, is it?
Lannister or Baratheon?
It's Lannister.
Is it Lannister or Baratheon? That's a controversial point. So, Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones.
Don't bother watching it. It ended terribly.
Yeah. Although House of the Dragon is very good. Anyway, sorry, Becca Ray. I said I'd bring up a comment that agreed with Megan, and Megan actually ended on this last point. Becca said second homes can have some justification, but third and fourth homes definitely not. I said to Megan before we started, I think that's kind of where I am. It was sort of like I could see some justification for one, somebody renting out a room in their home, or another, or one property that they're not living in, but going the way of regulation before. The same way, actually, as we have a very limited constitutional monarchy in this country, I think they should be got got rid of eventually altogether. But that's a much preferable system rather than having like a Henry VIII absolute monarch. Excuse me, got a cough. So most of our audience like us quite a lot. There's always one or two, though. And the People's Library cut in with, you people are a disgrace, and the fact you try to call yourself socialist at this point is harmful to building a real left movement. Would either of you like to respond to that one?
I don't consider myself a socialist. I like a full-on socialist. I consider myself. I don't know if you've heard of the term limitarianism. It was thought up by Ingrid Robbins, who's she's, I'm actually not sure. I think she's just an author of the book Limitarianism, but it's all about limiting people's wealth to 10 million. So nobody has more than 10 million, and the rest of it is dispersed throughout the ecosystem. And I just really like that idea. So I would consider myself more of a limitarianist than a socialist.
Well, I mean, I'm obviously a socialist, and I think first of all, having conversations and sometimes throwing in devil's advocates doesn't also give away your position. Like, sometimes I'll ask a question which is not what I think, but just to try and poke the bear and get the conversation going. I mean, what matters is policy. Like, I don't believe in private landlordism whatsoever. I think, for me, in fact, I think housing should be free. Like, I think the basic fundamentals of human life, housing, foods, transport, internet, that should be free from the state. It should be completely decommodified. So this goes way more radical than what the Green Party's saying. I just think it's okay to have a conversation where you can say, there's some nuance here and there. But ultimately, I don't believe in private landlords whatsoever. And if I had that vote, I'd vote to get rid of them. Like, I literally would vote to abolish landlords. Even if it probably wasn't a good practical solution, I'd do it. So I think, I think your comment would be fair if we were here saying, no, landlords are actually, good. We shouldn't do anything about it. The Green Party's policy is bad. Because sometimes as well, hearing critiques makes your argument better. So, but I love it. I do love it when we put up comments from haters.
Yeah, I'll respond to this one as well. I think no leftist movement in history has ever been successful without the support, at least, of liberal and sort of other people on the left who aren't socialist, and don't necessarily identically agree with the worldview that we hold. Like, Lenin didn't get to the position he was in by going, nope, unless you agree with the Bolsheviks specifically, none of that Menshevik shit here, then you're out of the out of the party, right? That's not how any socialist movement, regardless of whether you agree with any of those socialist movements, that's not how they've operated. And you can take that from the most radical to the most moderate. The ones that have been successful have built coalitions, and the real drive is in making sure that you are setting the agenda and you are setting the narrative. You're not allowing the liberal sort of and particularly the centrist and centre-right to set the narrative, because that is where the problems begin, because the centre-right will just copy the right will just copy the far right, and the far right will just copy the further right. It's a continual problem. As for us being socialist, we are called Turn Left. We're a media for socialism. We're pushing people left. I think it's not that harmful for us to call ourselves socialist. I just simply disagree.
I also think that I'm not a social democrat, but I think social democrats are part of the left. If you're a radical class war social democrat, that to me is part of the left. If it wasn't, you'd be throwing out Corbyn's manifestos. You'd be throwing out the entire Green Party if they weren't part of the left. Like, you don't have to be a socialist to be part of the left. You can be a social democrat. I'm a socialist because I want the entire means of production owned in the hands of the workers. But if someone's just like, I want to radically reduce inequality, public ownership of public services, wealth taxes, and that's it, I'm like, I'm more radical than you, but that's a very good program to start with, in which I think the majority of people in this country support. I don't think if I were to say, look, vote for me, and we're gonna get rid of the bourgeoisie, and it's going to be a state for the proletariat, it's not going to win. But I think if someone goes, let's have a politics for the many, not the few, which is social democracy, people would support that. It's also it's a transition. It's a stepping stone period as well.
No, I agree. I think a big reason as to why the far right is on the rise is because the right is so much better at banding behind one singular issue, whereas the left, we have a lot of passions. Obviously there's the social aspects of it, like LGBTQ plus, feminism, all that, and then there's the economic factors as well. And when you layer all of them together, obviously we're going to have some. There's going to be some disagreements here and there, because there is, purity leftism is not helping our cause. And as much as like there are certain issues that are absolutely deal breakers for the left, I would say for like 99% of the left, the main issue that we're dealing with here is fighting the far right, and we're not going to fight the far right if we're fighting each other.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to move on to the next comment. This was in regard to the Nigel Farage story. Noffel, who sometimes comes on the show, sometimes guests on the show, said he, Nigel Farage, may in private hold those views. Does that mean he will implement fascism? I don't think so. Reform's policies could lay the ground running for it later down the line. What do you think to the idea that Farage might not be the worst that we've seen of the British far right as yet?
I think the fact that he is getting so much press makes him the worst, because he is consistently on people's TV screens. He is consistently, I don't know if Reform would be as successful as they are without Farage. I don't think they would be, because Farage is just always on the airwaves. And that alone makes him the worst. Obviously if he was elected, which hopefully is not going to be the case, we're really fighting against that, but if he were to, worse things can come along the line for sure. But at the moment, because he is so prominent in British media and British press, that's what makes him a true villain.
For me, I think Noffel Khan, like that comment is 100% correct. That's exactly where I'm at. Like, absolutely, his private views are going to be far worse than what he says in public, right? That's obviously true. Do I think like it's 2029, Reform win a majority, then fascism happens? No, it's very unlikely that Reform ushers in fascism. But I absolutely do believe that Reform and the policies is the groundwork for something worse. Because what's going to happen, and this is my prediction, I don't think you should ever make political predictions, I'm doing anyway, is Reform get in. They absolutely do not hit their targets on lowering immigration, because to get to the levels of immigration they want, you cannot do that without changing the economic system and the global economic system. You cannot do that. Like, you cannot be pro-capitalist and then say we're going to bring migration down to like net zero. Not going to happen. So people are going to be angry with Reform for not delivering on their promises. And then I think that's where maybe UKIP, who the leader is a literal Nazi, by the way, those forces could potentially rise on that. It's why it's our job, those on the left, to not just absolutely fight Reform and Farage and the right and the far right, but offer an alternative.
Yes, very much so. Just a couple of comments to finish off. Keith Prince said you should have been at your party inaugural meeting. Lots of left sectarianism, nearly ended in a brawl.
Oh boy.
Oh dear.
Yes.
That is the left for you, though, isn't it?
Yep. What's the People's Front of Judea and People's Front meme from Monty Python? If you haven't seen that, definitely check that out. And the gaming actor said, and I think I agree, I think the Tories could actually poll much better if they only changed their policy decisions, politics, leadership, general vibe, and everything else. It's a great party.
You have in the first half there.
Excellent, absolutely excellent. I'm just going to double check that we haven't got anything else that we need to cover. Oh, yep. Urbane Legends gave £5.
Oh, thank you.
Don't worry, in 15 years, we will have the voting majority. A rough 15 years, but we will get through it. Let's hope so. And Rachel Atwood said, funnily enough, could Reform survive if Farage disappeared? As Rachel's paid to ask you the question, I'm going to put that question to you guys. You've kind of already answered it a little bit, but yeah, could it survive?
I don't think it could.
No.
I don't think it could. No.
I mean, there's a reason why he had to step into the leadership role, was to to take it from where it was at, like I think it was single digits, to where it is now. I mean, it is still very much personality cult. There's no way Richard Tice could have done. Look, Nigel Farage does have kind of characteristic that people warm to. I don't know why, and I don't know why people get fooled by him, but he does. He tricks a lot of people.
Yeah, I think the Führerprinzip, the leadership principle, plays a big role in his particular form of authoritarianism, and I think it does make me laugh when Reform go on about democracy, because you should always know your enemy. So I did a little bit of digging into Reform's leadership structure and got to know their leadership structure. They're ruled by an executive board. So, by the way, I think Darren Grimes, if I remember correctly, Darren Grimes is on that executive board, which is fucking hilarious. If you know who Darren Grimes is, he's a very stupid person. But 3 of the 8 people on that executive board were elected into their positions by the membership. The rest were all appointed. So 5 out of the 8 were all appointed by the leadership. Which is quite funny, because if they want to lecture us on democracy and seeing how much they actually believe in democracy, they don't at all.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I was hoping you guys were going to comment.
No,
on
I'm
that,
sorry.
but
I'm sorry. No. I was like, you're right. I agree.
Guys, you did.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Honestly, can't get the staff around here. Right, let's call it there for the comment section. I'll hand back over to Curtis and Megan to finish off. Thank you very much, guys.
One last super chat quickly.
Oh, sorry.
Are the Greens talking Scottish Greens? I don't know, but I thought I'd put it up because you gave us a super chat. I don't know if you know about that, Ben.
I'm not sure, honestly. Again, something we should talk to the Scottish Greens about. We should get in contact with them, just because it's good to be in contact with them. Nonetheless, and we don't do enough stuff on Scotland on this channel. To be fair, that's a critique which I would give. Right, I'm going to hand back to you.
Thank you so much, Ben, for that amazing comment section. Really good debates there. But of course, that is all we have time for. Thank you to our viewers who tuned in, and of course, thank you so much for Megan for joining me tonight. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Remember to like this stream, and if you're not a subscriber, then hit that button. If you want us to grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to our Patreon where you can support us monthly, or follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution. Alternatively, you can become a YouTube member for just 99p. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.